Hello everyone, my name is Patrick Kolar and I am the Field Research Coordinator for a broad-scale study of golden eagles being conducted in the Diablo Range Mountains by the U.S. Geological Survey in collaboration with a number of partner organizations including the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, East Bay Regional Park District, and the Peregrine Fund. Today I'll be discussing golden eagle territory occupancy in the Altamont Pass Wind Resource Area. Specifically, this talk will focus on historical versus current monitoring efforts for territorial pairs at the Altamont. I'll discuss some preliminary observations of site occupancy and nesting, and finally, I'll discuss how our broader research in the Diablo Range can be used to avoid or mitigate impacts at wind energy developments. I'll start by discussing some of the reasons for golden eagle issues in the Altamont. Numerous studies have documented the high rate of blade strike fatalities for golden eagles and other raptors in the Altamont, especially from older generation wind turbines that began operation in the 1980s. As the Altamont Pass moves towards repowering during recent years, which is a process of replacing these older style wind turbines with newer ones that are more efficient, larger, and generally further spaced apart, some areas are still showing these high rates of collisions. I won't discuss the details of collision rates in this talk, but it's important to remember that golden eagles in the Altamont are part of a much larger population. As a result, collisions in the Altamont can influence the persistence of eagles throughout the Diablo Range and possibly beyond. This includes potential changes in territory occupancy on properties in and around the Altamont that are managed by numerous public land agencies, such as East Bay Regional Park District and others. Golden eagles are a fully protected species in California and are afforded protection under numerous state and federal regulations from illegal take of individuals or nests that result from disturbance, injury, or death. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service provides guidance to assess risk of take and potential for avoidance of these impacts. Areas with high fatality rates, such as in the Altamont, and eagle nests or communal roost locations within 2 miles of a project, which is the distance at which territorial pairs could overlap with project construction and turbines, fall under the highest risk category with the lowest potential for avoidance. Construction of projects in such areas are generally not recommended because take is expected to occur frequently. In these situations, developers can apply for an eagle take permit with the Fish and Wildlife Service that helps determine the appropriate compensatory mitigation, so it's critical to identify these impacts prior to development. The Altamont Pass Wind Resource Area has generally thought to contain low-quality habitat for territorial pairs due in part to the perceived lack of suitable nesting substrates. Few pairs were thought to nest in the area in the past, but there has been some scattered information from various sources over the years, such as egg collections during the 1920s and 30s, site-specific surveys for nests around individual wind energy projects, long-term monitoring of golden eagle territories near the Los Vaqueros Reservoir at the northern end of the Altamont, surveys along transmission towers, and some incidental detections of nesting pairs. However, many of these are short-term or based on individual project areas, or focus only on locating nests. They rarely cover the entire Altamont and as a result, may miss some territorial pairs that are not breeding in a given year. One of the largest and longest studies overlapping with the Altamont was conducted by Granger and Terry Hunt in the 1990s and 2000s. They surveyed a much larger portion of the population within about 30 kilometers of the Altamont Pass Wind Resource Area, where they radiomarked over 250 eagles from different age classes and monitored golden eagle territories primarily in the most suitable habitats in order to estimate occupancy and reproduction for their demographic analyses. They documented few territorial pairs in the Altamont during this time, and those that they did detect, they thought nested further away from wind turbines. Note that this report, summarizing occupancy surveys in the Altamont, has been used as the authoritative reference regarding pairs and nests, or the lack thereof, in the Altamont, as even referenced in the previous U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service guidelines that I mentioned on a previous slide. However, this report did not include locations of eagle pairs that were documented prior to 2005. Beginning in 2014, USGS initiated a study to examine a greater portion of the population in the northern Diablo Range, primarily to determine if enough breeding pairs were present to maintain population stability under the hunt demographic analyses, given the wind turbine fatalities during that time. In contrast to traditional territory-based monitoring, we created a grid of equal-sized hexagons where each grid cell is roughly equivalent to the average territory size for a pair of golden eagles in this area. We surveyed a random selection of 138 hexagons for territorial pairs of eagles in nests, which allowed us to make inferences regarding the distribution of pairs and reproduction across the entire study area, while accounting for issues such as imperfect detection of pairs, that is, when they are actually present but not located during surveys. These methods allowed us to limit bias in our estimates from our models. We incorporated a number of potential sources of variation in our statistical models, including broad-scale vegetation cover types and high-resolution spatial climate data, looking at annual temperatures in precipitation and temperature, and also examining these effects as a gradient across the entire study area. We modeled estimates of the predicted probability of site occupancy by territorial pairs of golden eagles across the entire study area, given these characteristics and others. Based on results from random survey sites, we documented several territorial pairs of golden eagles overlapping with the Altamont Pass Wind Resource Area boundary, as you can see indicated by the black polygon, with a strong probability of other territorial pairs being located outside of our focal survey sites in this area and within the broader 2-mile buffer, based on landscape features such as high amounts of grassland habitat and rugged terrain that is common throughout the Altamont and highly associated with occupancy by territorial pairs. So starting in 2018, we began surveying more of these areas outside of our random focal sites in the Altamont Pass and attempted to monitor all pairs that we detected nearby for signs of nesting. From 2014 to 2020, we documented several territorial pairs of golden eagles that do not appear to have been documented or were only observed infrequently in the area, including within the Altamont. In contrast to published information, we found a total of 13 to 18 territorial pairs that we detected annually within the entire 2-mile buffer. 8 to 10 of these pairs had activity centered within the Altamont Pass boundary, where they were frequently observed less than 1 mile away from wind turbines. One of the explanations for the lack of observed territorial pairs in the Altamont in the past, outside of the Los Vaqueros Reservoir area at least, was the lack of suitable nesting substrates, as I mentioned before. Based on the nest locations we've documented, there are certainly fewer options in the Altamont, but there do appear to be enough trees that are evenly distributed throughout the area to explain our results. In many cases, there are lone groves of eucalyptus trees, like this one, which just happens to be located less than 400 meters away from 4 different wind turbines. There are also a number of scattered oak trees, ranging from the Los Vaqueros Reservoir in the northern portion to Brushy Peak on the western side, and then some others on the southern boundary of the Altamont. Here are some examples of other trees that range in size from 80 to 100 foot tall eucalyptus groves, once again, some of these being close to wind turbines, to trees as small as 25 feet tall along the eastern side of the Altamont. Here's an example of a failed ground nest from 2018 located on a rock outcrop above the old railroad track line between the current railroad tracks and Altamont Pass Road. As you can see, here is the eagle in incubation posture on eggs that were later found to have not hatched. We've also found golden eagles nesting in transmission towers along the eastern side of the Altamont, and in some cases, golden eagles are using trees located in the few residential areas in the Altamont or in other areas with high amounts of human activity. We've clearly established that there are territorial pairs of golden eagles in the Altamont Pass Wind Resource Area, and that these pairs are nesting nearby, in some cases close to wind turbines. So what does this new information on pairs and nests tell us about trends in the broader population? Well, maybe we found more pairs during recent years because the population has been expanding. You could also make the argument that maybe the Altamont Pass is functioning as a population sink because it contains low-quality habitat where territories are only occupied infrequently or are generally inconsequential to the broader population. To further explore these hypotheses, we revisited historical survey data from all sources we could find within 2 miles of the Altamont. We tried to match locations of past pair detections with our currently occupied territories, even if they were thought to only nest further away or were inconsistently detected in the past. Based on a combination of the historical surveys and our recent work, we mapped a total of 22 distinct territories that appeared to have been occupied within the 2-mile buffer of the Altamont during some period of time in the past. Almost 70% of these territories were occupied, and around 41% had some signs of nesting activity, including used nests with eggs or nestlings, and nests that were under construction or recently refurbished. Prior to our study, a few of these territories have since become vacant or were taken over by other pairs, such as after the construction of the Los Vaqueros Reservoir in the mid to late 1990s, and in a couple instances where territorial pairs were killed as a result of blade strike fatalities. Another possibility of more pairs being located in the Altamont during recent years could be due to a repowering effect, such as if new wind turbines have less of an impact and thus are making the area more suitable for occupancy by territorial pairs. Repowering is difficult to assess in this case because some projects began in 2011 and 2012, resulting in a mix of older and newer generation wind turbine types. However, the majority of older turbines were largely decommissioned and removed just prior to 2016. A large portion, about 86% of the total 22 territories, were still occupied with some signs of nesting activity for over half of the pairs in at least 1 year prior to repowering. During our study from 2014 to 2020, we detected pairs with activity centers overlapping the 2-mile buffer at 20 of 22 of these territories, although 13 to 18 have only ever been detected during any given year. Over 3/4 of all pairs occupying these territories have shown some signs of nesting activity, with more in 2020 than in any previous year. It can be difficult to interpret these scattered pieces of historical data, but they appear to show that many of the currently known territories were occupied prior to our study and prior to repowering, indicating that the population has not expanded during recent years, or at least not to a large degree. Okay, so what about the idea that the Altamont Pass contains lower quality habitat and serves as a population sink. Based on our random sample of survey sites, our models estimate more territorial pairs on average within 2 miles of the Altamont compared to the broader population. Over time, we also see a consistent number of continuously occupied territories in the Altamont. The only other area with an obvious higher density of territorial pairs is south of Livermore, both in our model-based estimates and based on known territorial pairs from all sources, including our study. We've also found a consistently higher rate of nesting at occupied territories within 2 miles of the Altamont Pass Wind Resource Area compared to the broader study area. This is likely due in part to the high densities of ground squirrels in the Altamont, but we have not incorporated prey densities directly into our models. As you can see, based on predicted occupancy by territorial pairs across the entire study area, most of the nesting that we have observed has been for territories within 30 miles of the Altamont, including within 2 miles of wind turbines. Nest success, however, has been inconsistent within the Altamont Pass compared with the broader study area. This is likely influenced by low sample sizes of nesting pairs within that 2-mile buffer around wind turbines, but it could also indicate some differences in prey densities, changes in climatic conditions, or even potentially collisions of breeding pairs leading to nest failure within the Altamont. As you can see, during 2015 and 2016, which were the worst of the drought years recently, territorial pairs within these areas, including the Altamont, had the highest probability for reproductive success compared to the southern half of the study area. Taken together, all of these appear to show that the Altamont Pass Wind Resource Area actually contains moderate to high quality habitat given the high density of territorial pairs and especially the high number of those that are nesting. But we do have some concerns about the inconsistency in reproductive success compared with other areas. Another interesting thing that we've noticed about territorial pairs in the Altamont is that many of them appear to have a member in subadult plumage, which is indicated by white at the base of the tail feathers, as you can see by the eagles on the right-hand side of the screen, compared to the adult eagles that have fully dark feathers on the tail or golden at the base of the tail feathers on the left. This is concerning because high proportions of territorial subadults can indicate either rapid changes in the population or high turnover of pair members related to decreased survival. Looking at the proportion of mixed-age pairs, that is, territories in which one is an adult and the other member is a subadult across the entire study area, we see a clear cluster pattern of these mixed-age pairs within 2 miles of the Altamont Pass Wind Resource Area. This pattern has been consistent in every year of our study, as you can see by the figure on the left. While this proportion of mixed-age pairs has been low for the broader study area at about 2 to 4%, it ranges from 22 to 36% within 2 miles of the Altamont. According to some studies, a population with more than 8 to 10% of territorial subadults is a sign of concern. In this case, the Altamont Pass Wind Resource Area may be functioning as an ecological trap for territorial pairs, where there are high-quality resources that attract eagles, especially high densities of ground squirrels, and nesting substrates that are suitable enough to be used, but with low survival from wind turbine collisions and other sources that cause high turnover of pair members. Based on a wide range of surveys for territorial pairs of golden eagles and nests in the Altamont Pass Wind Resource Area conducted over the past 30 years, it's possible that the area has actually sustained high levels of territorial occupancy. However, it's difficult to fully assess population trends from previous studies, due in part to the limited extent of these surveys and potential for imperfect detection of pairs from varying survey methods and even potential turnover of pair members resulting from collisions with wind turbines. Our recent surveys provide a useful comparison of the population within the Altamont and the broader Diablo range, and does indicate some concern regarding this turnover rate of pair members near wind turbines. It's therefore important to continue these surveys in the Altamont, especially during current repowering efforts, to document and monitor territorial pairs regardless of previous known occupancy and nesting status. These efforts will assist with mitigation and minimization, including micro and macro siting of wind turbines prior to construction, and curtailing wind turbines or using other methods to minimize collisions after construction. Finally, it's also important to reevaluate impacts to the population and possibly consider some methods of compensatory mitigation if the population impacts continue. Such approaches are needed to promote both wind energy production and the regional conservation of golden eagles in the area. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge a number of our partner and funding organizations and some individual people who have assisted with surveys and logistics with our study, including Doug Bell and the East Bay Regional Park District Golden Eagle Monitoring Team. I'd also like to thank Granger and Terry Hunt with the Peregrine Fund. Finally, I'd like to thank a number of organizations and many private landowners who have allowed us access to their property in order to conduct these surveys. Thank you very much.